This question from Keith by email. With Atletico Madrid reportedly interested in Andy Robertson, is he the player they need to challenge Real Madrid and Barcelona again, Andy?
It will take more than one, I think it's fair to say. But clearly, as we said in the main show this week, Atletico want to be quite aggressive in the transfer market this summer. It's definitely a spot where they could do with improvement. I mean, no disrespect to Javi Galán or Ronaldo. Of course, Ronaldo can play as a third centre-back as well as a left-back. He's sort of somewhere in between the two. Robertson, you immediately think of Kieran Trippier arriving at Atletico, don't you? And what a brilliant time he had there, becoming a champion in 2021 as well. Look, it's clear that he's coming to the end of his time at Liverpool, but would he do well at Atletico? Yeah, I think he would. I think he's got enough to do well. He's got that attacking side of him, but Diego Simeone, I think, will. Trippier talked about, even at his relatively advanced stage of his career, how Simeone improved his defending. So, look, I think it could be good for Andy Robertson as well.
JJ, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think as well it would be quite interesting to see another sort of member or staple of the Scottish national team plying his trade sort of outside of the UK as well, because there's quite a nice contingent of them at the moment. These kind of moves for me personally fascinate me when somebody who's enjoyed immense success with a club as great as Liverpool in the Premier League for years, opts for a new challenge to sort of reinvigorate their career much later on. And I think it's definitely a move that I'd be curious to see. As much as with my Aston Villa hat on, I'm kind of wondering if Atleti are going to be more tempted to go for Luca Dean to give us a bit of help in terms of our wages and transfer funds for the summer. But no, I think Robertson at Atleti could be a really interesting one to see unfold.
See, there you go. That's end of June, JJ answer. He'll have a different answer when we get to the middle of July.
We'll have you back on in about a month's time.
He's under PSR pressure.
Very good. This is from Frank on YouTube. Andy alluded to the potential impact the signing of Paul Pogba could have on Ligue 1. That was in your YouTube video on the OTC channel earlier this week. Despite PSG's success in the Champions League, is the reality, JJ, still that every league needs top names like Paul Pogba to attract viewers to their league? Very pertinent question with regards to France, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it feels like everybody's talking about Paul Pogba to Monaco except Paul Pogba and Monaco themselves, because I know Kylian Mbappe took advantage of his recent spell in hospital with an upset tummy to make a mention on social media of Pogba's imminent move to Monaco. And I think it's something to be really, really excited about, to be honest. Curious, obviously, to see what kind of level Pogba can perform at now after so long out of the game. But also, maybe this was the only way that Ligue 1 would be able to tempt one of its biggest names from that 2018 World Champions squad to come back and ply his trade in his home country. Because it's easy to forget that, Pogba, obviously, despite starting out with Le Havre, never actually made a senior appearance in French football. He's one of those kind of oddities, not quite like Kingsley Coman, because I think Coman got at least a handful of games in the French Cup, but Pogba never, really sort of never turned out at senior level in French football. So to see him taking his first steps sort of off the back of what's been a major ordeal, not just for him, but his family over the last couple of years, and try to relaunch his career in his home country. I think it comes at a really good moment for Ligue 1 because, like you mentioned, you've got PSG who have now been crowned champions of Europe, and, maybe more people will be keeping an eye on them week after week in, week out this coming season. So to have a name like Pogba signing up to ply his trade in Ligue 1 is massive, especially when you look at the exodus of some of the big names, like, for example, the players leaving Lille this summer, including Jonathan David. I do think it is shaping up to be a really intriguing time for French domestic football for next season.
Can it work, Andy? I mean, the question is this what the French league needs? Will it work?
Well, I guess going to the heart of Frank's question, we talked, or I talked in the YouTube video about how he might fit, and like the reality is we can't really know because he's been out of football for so long. But in terms of what he is as a name, I think it is super important. We saw it before with Messi, and again, like maybe on pitch, that wasn't necessarily the best thing for PSG, but it made a massive difference to Ligue. Another name, actually, talking of that 2018 France World Cup winning team, the president of Lille, Olivier Letang, has said they're interested in bringing Olivier Giroud. That's right, 38-year-old Olivier Giroud back from Los Angeles. And again, it doesn't seem the most obvious fit, and he's really struggled at LAFC. But you know, there's nothing to say that he wouldn't be a useful squad player, and it would get more eyes on Ligue 1. There's no doubt about it.
This question from Danny on Instagram, a great question. Are Barcelona actually likely to sign Nico Williams, or is this just a ploy by Athletic to drive up his price?
In terms of the price, no. Because what Athletic always do, they always sell for the release clause, because they're in this very particular situation where they've only got a limited pool of people that they can replace from, because of course they only take Basque players. So it's the reason, for example, that Kepa, when he went to Chelsea, went for 80 million euros, because it's like release clause or you're not going. That's the way they work things. But Nico Williams has got a relatively low release clause, like is below 60 million euros for a player of his quality, of someone who's proven that he's got it at the top level. So the price doesn't really come into it. Barcelona or whatever club will either pay it or he will not leave. It's that simple, and he's very, very well paid.
But I've been hearing so many conflicted things of whether he's going or whether he's not going, and it's a good question in that respect.
Yeah, it is, because I think Danny's right to have some scepticism, of course, because Barcelona were pretty sure they were going to get him last year in a page straight out the book, Confidence by John Textor. And they looked at it and thought, he can't resist us, therefore they will get him. And then they realised how much they've actually got in the piggy bank. They realised pretty quickly they couldn't sign both Dani Olmo and Nico Williams. And of course, Nico's older brother, Iñaki, is a good source of advice to him. And part of that advice was, what if they sign you and they can't register you? Which, given what happened to Dani Olmo twice during last season, was pretty good advice, it turned out. Now, look, Barcelona feel they're in a much stronger financial position now because they've got extra money from Nike for renewing the kit deal. However, I think it's right to have a note of caution. And the other thing is that Bayern have kind of lined themselves up as ready to receive should anything go wrong. Like, they've always kept contact with Nico Williams' camp. They want a left winger this summer. They've had a little look at Rafael Leao, of course, as well of Milan. But if they could get Nico Williams, Bayern would love Nico Williams. They've put themselves in a position and kept the dialogue going to say, look, we know you want Barcelona. If this doesn't come off, we are ready to sign you. And I think it'd be really interesting to see how he developed at Bayern as well.
This is from Ivan on X. Are you watching the Euros, under 21 Euros, by the way? And if so, which players have you liked, and who could have a breakout season this year? Well, thank you for asking, Ivan. I've been watching the Young Lions, and, well, I would say Harvey Elliott, and the game that I watched was
ready for a breakout season.
Yeah, exactly. He might have already broken out beforehand. Do you want to pick up on that, though, JJ? You've watched a bit of it. A young player breakout season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think anybody attached to French football knows that it's a good idea to keep an eye on what's going on at under 21 level, especially with the major international tournaments, because you're likely to get a good indication as to who might be the next big star to come through at Ligue 1. And I don't think it's any surprise that I'm going to go for a name from the academy in Rennes. We've seen obviously what Désiré Doué has done since moving to PSG. A massive breakthrough for him last season, like really, grabbing everybody's attention during PSG's run to Champions League success. So I'm going to go for young João Cissé. And although I say young, he's not quite as young as some of the other under-21s on show in that competition. But Rennes' latest gem, 3 goals to his name in the tournament, definitely an exciting prospect who we've seen little bursts of at senior level with the Breton side, but I'm certainly hopeful that he's going to go on to build on what's been quite a promising 2025 for him so far.
Yeah, the Rennes Academy is absolutely relentless, by the way, in case we're in any doubt over that. I don't know if you saw, JJ, but the introduction of their former coach, Julien Stéphan, as QPR coach on Twitter this week, which I have to say the video looked as if it had been done by a work experience student.
Yeah, stylistically jarring, I think we can call it.
a little.
Authenticity, that's what's called authenticity.
Authenticity.
Yeah.
But it was quite interesting, the underlining of the players he'd worked with. So, of course, you had Rafinha in there. But when you talk about the development of players, like Jeremy Doku, who, of course, they bought for quite a lot of money from Anderlecht, but also Desiree Doué, the Rennes Academy, JJ, smashes it season after season after season, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And funnily enough, João Cissé, although it's a player who didn't come through the Rennes Academy, he did have a stint with Rennes. João Cissé also comes from the same formative club as Paul George and Tep. Remember him? A bit of a blast in the past, the Bretigny Academy. So Entep went to Rennes via Auxerre. But João Cissé obviously went straight from the Paris talent basin to Rennes. And I think that's one thing that's really underrated about what Rennes have managed to do, and they've perfected the art of over the years. They don't just identify the talent sort of within their basin in Brittany. They also have managed to tap into the Paris talent basin and the number of top prospects that they managed to get. Look at Mathys Tel, for example, when he made his move to Bayern Munich. It basically feels like they churn out one major gem every season. And it's quite timely for them at the moment that the Youth Academy is still continuing to deliver like this, because it's not been a great last couple of years on the pitch. Everything about Rennes is structured so well and seems to run so well off the pitch in terms of creating that talent to be put on the pitch and put to good use. But when it's almost like when they step over the white line, it's almost like it's a ticking time bomb then as to when they're actually going to make the move and jump, from Rennes to another club in Europe. Because as soon as they make that senior debut, it's like they show up on the radar of so many, top European sides who are just sort of waiting to discover this latest gem that comes off the production line.
And as JJ says, it's about the development of players as well, not just the guys who come out of their academy. So it's interesting on that little video that we were describing of Julien Stéphan, the authentic one. That Rafinha was the first player on that. It was quite interesting because, of course, I guess he's the one you would use as the headliner because he's a contender for the Ballon d'Or. But how he developed there after arriving from Portugal, of course, that saw him make it to the Premier League, and that was really the start of him edging up towards that elite level from just being a good player. So I think that's sometimes underrated, the development of talent from outside rather than just, these young stars who come out of the academy. The guy I wanted to underline from the under-21 Euros, well, you'll see him in the final at the weekend. He plays for Germany against England. Nick Woltemade, who, funnily enough, has not only had a great under-21 tournament, scorer in the semi-final against France as Germany won 3-0, but funnily enough, he's been linked with some absolutely humongous clubs, most notably Real Madrid, I suppose, during this last couple of weeks. And people are just starting to realise what an interesting prospect he is. Now, came into Stuttgart last summer as, I guess, look, I don't think anyone was expecting anything massive from him because he arrived from Werder Bremen where he wasn't getting in the team and hadn't scored a lot of goals. And Woltemade, I guess, in the gap left by Seydou Guirassy, but also the fact that Denis Undav missed large parts of this season, Woltemade has been fantastic for Stuttgart this season. Now, why people are so interested in him is because he's such an atypical shape of striker. He's a big guy, 6'6", but he's got really, really good ability in terms of finding scoring spots. He makes great runs. So he's one of those players, I guess, in a way like Erling Haaland, although I wouldn't particularly compare them, in that what he looks like physically and what he actually is as a player is quite different. Now, of course, he's still quite difficult to mark. He's awkward to deal with. He's still good in the air. But there are so many other aspects to him. And in a year, I guess the reason he's been linked with Real Madrid, in a year where they're really looking for someone who can do that Joselu role for them. Now, of course, he'd be quite a posh Joselu. He's also been linked, Voltemada, with Bayern as a backup for Harry Kane. I mean, that's one of the most thankless tasks in European football, because you're never going to get a game.
Well, he's definitely got the Barnett and facial hair to potentially be a Real Madrid sort of peripheral figure in their squad. It's a lot. There's a lot for the stylists to work with.
Definitely, I think we're looking at Alice Band within 4 months. That's what we're looking at there. I think Voltemada could be good for a lot of different clubs. For the moment, I hope he stays at Stuttgart, because they're going into Europe next season. Another good season for him, and then maybe a move from there. He's only 23 still. He's one of the overage players in this squad. So I think he's got a way to go. He's developed so brilliantly at Stuttgart. I just want him to be somewhere where he's going to continue to play this summer, but well worth watching.
And this question from Paul on Instagram kind of reflects what we were talking about on OTC yesterday. Our lead story was all about Ligue and Lyon, Lyon's demise specifically. And Paul on Instagram says, I know they're not actually dead, but now Lyon's Ligue 1 era has come to an end, quote unquote. There's a caveat there. Who have been your favourite players to watch in red, white and blue since their promotion in 1989? Andy, you've got to take that one.
Yeah, it's been a while, hasn't it? It's going to be a long list in that case. Okay. Look. First off, the ones that spring to mind immediately for me, one youth product and one non-youth product. So Sidney Govou, who during those title-winning years embodied everything that was good about the club. You think of when they were really establishing themselves at the top level. He scored on the final day of the season where they beat Lens to win their first Ligue 1 title in 2002. Earlier in that season, he scored twice against Bayern Munich in the Champions League. On his day, an absolute world beater. His day didn't come maybe as often as he would have hoped, but in between, he always worked incredibly hard, and he embodied everything that it should be about. So you can talk about Benzema, Ben Arfa, etc., etc. Govou, for me, embodied everything about being a local boy who wanted to play for the club. I guess it's funny that Alexandre Lacazette took over from Govou later on when he came out of the academy and became a completely different player, excelled in so many different ways. But Govou has a special place in my heart. The other one, of course, is Juninho Pernambucano, the greatest free kick taker of all time, who developed into something really special. We talked in the main show about the passing of Bernard Lecomte and what an influential figure he was there. He played a massive part in Juninho getting signed as they really increased their scouting network under Marcelo in South America in the early part of the 21st century, when they had a lot of Brazilian players, but none better than him, who became a captain, a leader, and part of some great teams who got some massive wins in the Champions League, as well as part of all those 7 title wins.
JJ, has Andy left you anything to chew on?
I mean, to be honest, the list is so exhaustive that I think even I'm going to struggle to completely tick every name off of the list. But I mean, they were just, I think it's really underrated. And, people will look back on the great Lyon side of the early 2000s that was just oh so dominant in Ligue 1. And there's just so many names attached to it where when you say that name, people will have probably forgotten about that player, yet immediately remember how good they were for Lyon. I mean, Andy was talking about some of the South American talent. People will probably remember Chris, marshalling the defence for years and years for Lyon. Gregory Coupé in goal, for example. Sonny Anderson in attack. I have fond memories of Giovanni Elber, despite the fact that many people will remember him better for his time with Bayern. I mean, I think we've already touched on Benzema, but then there's some other, so perhaps you could call them lesser lights, who still have a special place in my heart, I guess, through my love of Liga. Michel Bastos, for example, loved a long-range cracker. These kind of guys, I mean, it's, there's so many of them attached to Lyon's, great story from the early 2000s. Lisandro Lopez as well didn't necessarily enjoy the same success as, some of his other South American predecessors, but also still an important figure, certainly in the early years of the rivalry, the growing rivalry with QSI-backed PSG, when PSG were usurping Lyon as kind of one of the main dominant forces in French football. So there's so many different names that you can potentially reel off, and it makes this story about Lyon's potential relegation, administrative relegation to Ligue 2 all the sadder, because they've had so many of the most important players in Ligue 1's history over the years playing for them. So many great memories of them competing in Europe as well. For it to be threatened in the way that it is at this moment in time, I think is hugely just distressing, not just for the Lyon fan base, but for the Ligue 1 and French football fan base and wider family in general.
And I think it sort of links to Ivan's question, the previous one actually, about developing young players, because such a huge part of Lyon's personality has been developing young players. So, we've talked about them. You can talk about like World Cup winners like Fekir, like Umtiti. We already talked about Lacazette, Benzema, Ben Arfa, players like that. Like the list of Lyon youth products is unbelievable. It's up there with an Ajax or a Bayern Munich in the terms of the talent they've produced for themselves and eventually for other elite European clubs as well. So I think one of the most detrimental things of the John Textor regime, we talk about him selling off the stuff that the club owns, like JJ talked about them in the main show, selling the very successful women's team, selling the LDLC arena, which is dead opposite the Group Armour arena, the basketball and concert hall.
I wouldn't rule out the Group Armour being sold either.
Well, you never know. But you look at like what he's not done with the youth academy. Like they sold the original building at Tola Vologe, which all those players came through and moved them. And it's interesting. They bring out a sort of list every year in France of the top youth academies in France. And Lyon and Rennes are always 1 and 2. Lyon are 4th this year. Now, that might still seem like pretty good, but if you're looking at the fact that they're always in the top 2, and all of a sudden they're not, it's just another example of that negligence and the fact that this is something that has always played a massive part in the club.
And that's my way of saying, go and listen to yesterday's OTC, where we go through the troubles and the travails of, in particular, Lyon, but Ligue 1 in general. The point that JJ alluded to as well is that Lyon's relegation from Ligue 1 is pending an appeal, and of course we'll keep you across that, of course, in the coming weeks, etc. Game of the week time, though, gentlemen. About this time every single week, we ask you to recommend a game for us to watch at the weekend, and just as importantly, to also suggest a food companion to go with it, to suggest something that we should eat whilst we're watching. Andy, what are you going for this week as your game of the week?
I was thinking straight of the food already. Well, look, I'm going for Flamengo. I bet you are. I'm going for Flamengo versus Bayern Munich. Of course, Flamengo then beating Chelsea was one of the highlights of the group stage. Bayern, I think, have been better in this competition than people have given them credit for. Of course, people started with a 10-0 win over Auckland and like, oh, well, it's only Auckland, and sort of diminished them from there. But I think Bayern look competitive in this tournament. And I think a clash with Flamengo will be really, really interesting as well. Like I said, in the main show, I'm just so here for the meetings between the South American teams and the biggest European teams as well. And as it's Brazil, as it's Rio in the final, well, look, we're going to have to go for some straight churrascaria. I had some great Argentinian food in Hollywood when I was in LA doing that.
Yeah,
that main
there's a lot of meat on that plate.
Yeah, I did have some spinach as well. Come on, give me the credit. Give me the credit. And anyway, that was brilliant. But yeah, it's gonna have to be the full churrascaria. My favourite cut of Brazilian meat is the picanha. That's as good as the steak gets. Of course, we're gonna get everything else involved as well. The feijoada, every other element of Brazilian food, because that's what the churrascaria is about. Not just one particular meal, but you've got you have the little placemat, the little coaster, and when you go in a churrascaria, you have a red side and a green side. Green side means fill me up, carve me more meats, and then when you're completely full up and you really can't have any more, you turn it over to the red. But we won't be turning over to the red in a hurry, will we?
Waiter, give me whatever he's having. He seems to know what he's talking about. And that's on Sunday at 9 p.m, Flamengo versus Bayern Munich. JJ, what are you going for?
So I think the bar's been set high, but I'm going for a couple of hours earlier. So it's Sunday's earlier offering, and it's going to be European champions PSG. I know, not very imaginative of me. I'm apologising for that, but it's for good reason. European champions PSG against former star man Lionel Messi, who obviously was part of many of the failed attempts of PSG to win that elusive Champions League up until their recent victory over Inter. And although I think it's a little bit of a shame that this one will be played in Atlanta and not Miami, I am still fascinated to see how this one plays out, because of all of the star departures, Neymar, Kylian Mbappe and Messi, I think Messi's probably feels the most, I'm not going to say acrimonious, but it feels like there was the most needle in that departure. There doesn't really feel like there's any warmth from Lionel Messi's camp towards PSG, and I don't think there'll be any love lost, especially now PSG have managed to go on to bigger success without Messi being in the picture. Obviously, no Mbappe as well, and a lot was made of sort of the tension between Mbappe and Messi when Messi was crowned world champion with Argentina and Mbappe had been an unlucky runner-up with France. But I'm curious to see how this one plays out, and I think it's one of the better storylines that's been served up. Speaking of being served up, I'm going to stay on the topic of South American food, and I will move from Brazil to Argentina. I'm on a bit of an empanadas kick at the moment, so this one's quite easy for me. I'm going to go for a plate of empanadas, so a lot of different varieties. I'll probably go with like the spicy ground beef one, definitely the jamón y queso, and a handful of the others. Big fan of the spinach one as well. But as long as the chimichurri has a little bit of a kick to it and there's a quilmes on the side, I'm a happy man.
Do you think this could be the greatest ever week for food?
For food, yeah. Well, both of you gone South American, yeah.
Finally, we've discovered the meaning of the Club World Cup.
Indeed. For a nice way of ending this conversation, thank you, Andy, and thank you, JJ, as well.